So now we have GDP, and we have real GDP, and we have real GDP per capita. So what? So what? What are we going to do with this, and what does it really represent? What we're trying to do is measure the happiness of our people. Now, admittedly, money doesn't buy happiness, but it does buy a lot of good up to a certain point, including some measure of happiness. If we don't have some money, we can't eat, we're not happy. However, Kahneman, in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, said that at that time, money was only able to increase your happiness up to $75,000 a year per person. This means once you're making more than $75,000 a year per person, you're really not any happier. You might be more comfortable. Maybe you can buy things that you couldn't buy before, but you're not really going to be more happy. GDP is not a perfect measure of happiness. In fact, far from it. One of the challenges that we have is there are a lot of good things that GDP doesn't measure, and they're left out. So let's go over some of those. GDP does not measure leisure. So the time we spend doing the things we like to do, that's not included in GDP because we're not paying for it. GDP does not measure improvements in quality. So when you get a new iPhone and it's actually cheaper than the old iPhone, but it has more features, no, that's actually considered deflation, and the improvements in quality are ignored. GDP does not measure the benefits of education. So when we buy an education, we believe that we're going to get benefits for years to come. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. And those benefits in years to come are not measured by GDP. GDP does not measure the underground economy because it's not recorded in public information. Fortunately for us, our underground economy in the U.S. is quite small, but there are countries where it's much larger. Another thing that GDP doesn't measure is increases in life expectancy. I think living a life that's twice as long is pretty valuable, and yet that's not included in GDP. How much has GDP in real dollars per capita changed over the years? If we go back even just 200 years, you're going to find that GDP per capita was extremely low. We're talking about in the $10 or $5 a month type numbers. You can't live well on those numbers. So people lived in hovels. They carved caves to live in. They lived in little farmhouses they built out of straw. And a lot of them died from starvation. Most people for the last 10,000 years have been slaves or serfs. There's only been a handful of people that were emperors, or that were pharaohs, or kings, or lords. The vast numbers of people, your ancestors, my ancestors, lived as slaves and serfs to those people. Or if they were lucky, they had a little piece of land out in the middle of nowhere, and they could farm it as a subsistence farmer, but they didn't have good tools. Most of them starved to death. What changed? I showed you the graph. It's crazy. Starting about 200 years ago, GDP per capita took off. It went almost straight up. And it's continuing today. There's never been a time in the history of the world where the world's wealth has been per capita as high as it is. The poorest people in America 200 years ago would have been considered lords. They have a home to live in. They have a television. I mean, are you kidding? Compared to what they had back then. They have access to food and education. So what changed? What caused this to happen? Well, this gets back to our big question. What causes sustained economic growth? And again, if we can solve this problem and help everybody become rich, then we can have world peace. Because if everybody's rich, they're not going to want to fight each other and have their things broken. Kings used to get the serfs and the slaves to fight for them, but he did that tip of a bayonet. Okay, I mean, the poor people are the ones who are always doing the fighting. We're rich, we're not going to fight. We're not going to send our sons and daughters to war. So what happened? Well, we're going to spend some time in the next couple of weeks. We're going to spend some time this semester looking at the factors that make a difference. And we need this GDP, real GDP per capita, to measure how we're doing. I told you that I would give you some numbers on the underground economy. So here are some numbers. Bolivia, last time I checked, had the highest level of the underground economy at 68%. Mexico, very high, 33%. Interestingly, Sweden, which is always held up to be this wonderful semi-socialist state, has 18% underground economy. You have to wonder if that isn't because their tax rates are so high. Japan has an 11% underground economy, and the US has an 8% underground economy. So this is the portion of our economy that's not being reported. And fortunately, ours is a very small number.